Hello, welcome to this brief introduction to OKRs with me, Alan Kelly. If you haven't heard of them before, OKRs stand for Objectives and Key Results. OKRs have been getting a lot of attention, certainly in the tech community of late, and they're more broadly applicable, as with so much from tech, to other domains. And part of the reason they got so much attention is because of the success of the companies where they started. If we go back in time, OKRs began life in the late 1960s at Intel. At the time, Andy Gove was the COO, and he refined management by objective into a system that became known as Intel MBOs. So OKRs superficially look like MBOs, and they have a kind of relationship, MBOs and OKRs, but actually OKRs are different from MBOs, and OKRs need to be handled differently. We'll talk a bit about this. So while they came from MBOs, they are different. One of the people who experienced OKRs at Intel was a young engineer called John Doerr. John went on to become a venture capitalist. You may have heard of him, he's quite famous. And he evangelized OKRs to the companies he invested in. And one of the companies he invested in around the year 2000 was Google, and I don't need to tell you how successful Google is. And Google are big users of OKRs. OKRs are important to Google. So a lot of people have heard about OKRs in the context of Google. And the role they play is really around implementation, is doing what you set out to do. One of Google's founders, Sergey Brin, a few years ago, he said this. He said, "It's important not to overstate the benefit of ideas. The execution and delivery are what is key." And OKRs are there. They're about execution and delivery. They're about deciding what to do and doing it and staying on that path. So, objectives and key results. The objective, the thing you really want, it's the goal, it's the outcome. It delivers some benefit to somebody. It's what we're trying to do. And notice that it's an outcome. It's not a milestone. It's not a plan. It is itself an outcome. That's our objective, our goal, our overarching reason for doing something. And then we have key results. A lot of people, including myself on occasions, kind of fall into the trap of thinking the key results are small pieces of the objective. It's almost like the objective is a Lego house and the key results are the bricks you put in place. That's true in some occasions, and sometimes you can work that way. But more often than not, the key results are actually your acceptance criteria. They are bounding the problem. They are telling you how you're going to be measured, how you will know you succeeded in meeting the objective. I heard someone recently describe it as objectives are qualitative. They describe what you want, and the key results that go with that objective are quantitative. They are the ways you're going to measure your success or progress. And that raises another interesting point about OKRs is we're very keen on OKRs being quantified. The key results should be things which we can look at and say, how much of this have we achieved? Have we done it 100%, 50%, 25%? We want to get some numbers in there. Now, that is also one of the downsides of OKRs. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail now. Just want to put a word of warning down that we don't want to create goals where we are going to suffer from targetitis. We don't want to be suffering from gaming our metrics. So OKRs are a double-edged sword, They're a very powerful technique, but they do come with certain cautions. So that's one of them, but we'll park that for today. So that's our OKRs, an objective, a big thing, the key results, how we're going to measure our success. And it's worth talking a little bit about the benefits we can expect from OKRs, or the promised benefits, the kind of benefits that Google and Intel have seen. First up, I'm going to highlight what I just said about being outcome orientated. This is not about marking progress against a plan. This is not about saying we've achieved the first 2 stages of a plan. One of the things we're asking for in OKRs is not to think about intermediates, not to think about stepping stones, to think about the outcome, the thing that's going to create the benefits for our customers, what is going to make the world a better place, what's going to further our mission and the purpose of this organization. I think one of the problems we've seen with some management techniques in the past is people become too orientated towards achieving milestones and creating progress reports that are positive. What we want to do with OKRs is pull things back to, have we got an outcome in the last quarter which is advancing us? And I just mentioned there for the first time, OKRs are typically set on a quarterly cycle. The next benefit I want to highlight from OKRs is focus. And this for me is the superpower in OKRs. They allow us to prioritize the work we're doing by giving us an overarching goal for this period. And that allows us to say no to things. Typically, your teams will have 3 or 4 OKRs, even better if they have 1. Yeah, definitely do not have 18, right? So a team will have a few overarching OKRs, which have been agreed in the team and elsewhere, and that gives the team the power to say no. When work is flooding in, the team can go and say, does the work we are being asked to, does it further our OKR? Or should we be saying no to this work? Should we be pushing back on it? Because we can only get focus and we can only truly execute our priorities if we are not doing other things. If we are doing everything that comes to us, we will not have focus and we will not be able to follow our priorities. I'm going to caveat that by saying, if your house is burning down, stop and put the fire out. There are times when you want to go off-piste and ignore the OKRs, but at least do that with some knowledge that you're going off-piste, that you're breaking the OKRs. And if it happens on a regular basis, we need to talk about that. The next benefit I see from OKRs is communication. First of all, within the team, because, and this is one of the differences with MBOs, OKRs come from the team. The team get together, the team discuss what the OKRs should be, the team set their own OKRs. So first of all, you've got communication within the team. You've got agreement within the team. That means the team is engaged. That means the team are thinking about those goals. So within the team, there's a communication aspect. Then in the wider context, with the wider organization, if you've got multiple teams executing on OKRs, you've got a standardized format for saying, hey, what are the teams doing? Are these teams joining up? What are these teams, where are these teams handing off to each other? Where are the teams conflicting with each other? We can see that. And not just between the teams. It's with other people in the organization, other stakeholders in the organization who may have a relationship with the team. And when in those stakeholders, I'm going to include the more senior managers, the more senior leaders who are working with the teams and who the teams are reporting to. So OKRs gives a standardized way of having these conversations. Now, if you read the OKR books and the OKR literature, you won't go very far before you come across this idea that OKRs are stretch goals. They're about ambition. They're about what gets called 10x thinking. And the idea here is that if we aim very high, we may miss the goal, but we will achieve more than if we aim low and hit the goal. You hear people talk about moonshots. If we aim for the moon, we may only get halfway to the moon. So in some ways we've failed to get to the moon. But you know what? Getting halfway to the moon is still getting a lot further than if we aim for low Earth orbit, right? We may aim for low Earth orbit, we may achieve low Earth orbit, but we're still not very far towards the moon. So the idea here is that OKRs should be encouraging stretch goals, ambitious goals. While there's a lot of this in the OKR literature, I don't see this as the main advantage of OKRs. I think a lot of whether you're going to go for stretch and ambitious goals really is rooted in your culture as an organization. Does your organizational culture have an ambition? Does your organization tolerate failure? If somebody misses their goals, how do you treat them? Are people psychologically safe in your organization? I don't think OKRs alone will lead to an ambitious organization that stretches for its goals, but OKRs can certainly be used in that environment, and OKRs can certainly be one of the tools to help you work towards those goals. OKR thinking is a lot about stretch goals and ambition. My final benefit for now is I see OKRs driving strategic conversations. They allow you to compare and contrast priorities. If the leadership is suggesting a certain vision and a certain direction of travel, and you've got a team who has OKRs that don't line up, that's a reason to say, why doesn't this team's OKRs? What is this team seeing that is different? Now, there may be good reason why the team is doing something different. It may be that this team is actually looking after a cash cow product, and what is right for them is to keep milking the cow, and in milking the cow, they will fund the other teams to pursue the long-term goal. Or it might be that the team just hasn't got the message, or the team has misinterpreted the message. So I think this allows you to drive strategic conversations about what is being done. It allows you to see where the gaps are. And also, this is a route towards allocating your resources strategically. I mean, more generally, I'm keen on is getting away from the idea that we decide all the things we're going to do. We work out how long all these things are going to take. We add it all together and we decide how many people we need in each one. I'm much more a fan of saying, what are we trying to do strategically? Let's put our resources behind those strategic objectives. Now, let's see what we can do with those strategic objectives in the resources we're given. So I think OKRs are one mechanism of highlighting these issues and bringing them to the fore and having these conversations. And certainly, if you've got teams that have 18 OKRs, that's a conversation to have in its own right. Why have they got so many? And please don't tell me the teams are bigger. The bigger a team is, the fewer OKRs they should have, because the bigger the team is, the more difficult it is to get focus. So in summary, the benefits from OKRs are around an outcome orientation, focusing your teams, communication within the teams and beyond the teams. They're about setting stretch goals, and it's about propagating or initiating strategic conversations. So we've talked about what OKRs are, and we've talked about some of the benefits. Next, I want to talk about how we use OKRs in practice. I have an egg timer here to illustrate OKRs in practice for two reasons. First of all, OKRs are normally executed in 3-month iterations, quarterly cycles, 12, 13 weeks. 13 weeks might be the right time frame for you. It's what's normally used in OKRs. I've heard good arguments that using shorter and longer periods might actually be better, but it's a conversation we can have. So I'll keep talking about quarters because that's the norm in OKRs. Important thing is at the end of the quarter, you reset. You review your progress and you set OKRs for the next quarter. So the second reason I have the egg timer is that I see the OKR process as a bit like an egg timer, fat at the front, long and narrow in the middle, and fat at the end. We do a lot of deep thinking and ask a lot of deep questions at the beginning. We think broadly. Once we've set the OKRs, we narrow down, we really focus on execution for the next 10 or 12 weeks, and then at the end, we breathe a sigh of relief and we think broadly again when we're evaluating what we've delivered, and then we repeat. A word of warning here for those of you who come from an Agile background. Most of my work is with OKRs in Agile. There's a tendency in the Agile world to see objectives as epics, and they're not. OKRs are not a really big thing that needs to be broken down. Objectives are the outcome you desire, or at least they're a hypothesis of the outcome that is needed to advance the mission, to satisfy customers, to give your stakeholders what they need. And hand in hand with this, when you see objectives as epics, you tend to see key results as stories. You tend to see key results as these smaller pieces that go together to make up the objectives. And they're not. The right way to see key results is they are the acceptance criteria. They are the quantification of acceptance criteria. And importantly, they are testable. We're able to use the key results to measure progress against the objectives. So, if you're from an Agile background, objectives are not epics and key results are not stories. It's more a case of objectives are fairly big, meaningful stories and key results are acceptance criteria. Now, those of you from an Agile background again may start to recognize something here. I think of OKRs as a form of test-first management. So from those of you not from an Agile background, in the Agile world, one of the popular techniques is called test first development or test first working. And doing a test first approach, you set out what you want to achieve, and then you write the tests you will apply to know whether you have met your goal. This technique has existed for a long time in programming. OKRs, to my mind, are moving the same idea into management. Here's our objective, here's what we want to achieve, and here, with the key results, are the tests we are going to apply. So I sometimes think of OKRs as test-first management. I mentioned management by objective before, and there is a tendency amongst many people to kind of transpose management by objective directly onto OKRs. And really, that's wrong. In the traditional management objective world, you had somebody, a leader, or maybe even a planning department at the top of the organization. And these people decided what the organization was going to do, typically for the coming year. They would pass these objectives down to the layer below them. So senior management would pass them to middle management. Middle management would pass them to the workers. And each layer would take the objectives they were given and they would set the objectives for the people below them. Now, you sometimes see this model in the OKR world. I call it cascading OKRs or COKRs for short. This is not the way OKRs should be. OKRs, the theory and philosophy behind OKRs aligns much more closely with the Agile world and the idea of pushing authority down to the people doing the work. So, while undoubtedly you see this model in the OKR world, we should not be doing this. The model for OKRs is different. This is an outdated model. The model you want to get into your heads in the OKR world is closer to this. Your senior team, your CEOs and the important people in the organization, they are painting a picture of where you're going. They're talking about the destination. They're describing a shining city on a hill that we all want to go to. They're talking about the purpose of the organization. They're describing the missions of the organization, the aims of the organization. They deliberately leave some white space. They deliberately do not fill in the details. They deliberately do not decompose the vision of the shining city on a hill and say to some people, you build me a cathedral, you build me some houses, you build me an office quarter. Because in a modern organization, in a product-oriented organization, you have existing teams. New teams do come into being from time to time, but generally your teams have a persistence. The leaders paint a picture of where they want to go to, and then they say to these teams, how can you help? Teams that are out there, teams of your specialist knowledge, with the products you support, with the customers you deal with your value chains, how can you help us achieve this destination? How can you help us move towards the city? And the teams talk about this, and this repeats every quarter. The teams talk about this, and the teams reply to those senior leaders, this quarter, this is what we'll do. And they offer these things up. They say, this is how we're going to move towards that shining city on a hill. And because we have a standardized way of talking about things, we can have conversations about this. Teams can show the OKRs they're proposing to work with to their stakeholders, including senior leaders, and they can take feedback on them. Maybe if necessary, they'll throw some away. Maybe they'll tweak some. Maybe they'll add something else in. Of course, if you add something else in, something else has to go out. Okay, so there's a conversation to be had there. So the teams are much more engaged. The teams are much more involved because the leaders leave deliberate white space. And this all happens typically on a 13-week cycle. And it's really quite simple. At the beginning of the quarter, you set what the OKRs are going to be. You start. And you're really focused on delivery. You're focused on delivery all through that cycle. And particularly in the early weeks, that's the only thing you're thinking of. As you get towards the end of the cycle, and you need to work your own timetable out here, teams are going to be thinking about drafting OKRs for the next quarter. And when you get even closer, you're going to be sharing them with the teams you work with and with your stakeholders. You're going to get feedback. At some point, you're going to have a final draft of your OKRs. And then at the very end of the quarter, you're going to close out your previous OKRs. You're going to review what happened. You're going to have a retrospective. You're going to sit down with the team, you're going to think broadly, scratch your heads, think about how you could work better. And there's going to be some feedback from the OKRs you've just finished into the OKRs that are coming up, if only how you go about doing them. And then you're done. That quarter is closed and it's moved off. And you start all over again. And you go round the cycle again. So this is where I'm saying this is a wide, narrow, wide process. You start off with expansive thinking about what the OKRs should be. When you're setting OKRs, you ask difficult questions. You then move into the narrow phase and you're focused on executing. You almost put blinkers on to only focus on your OKRs, right? You make progress here. And then as you come to an end, you go broad again. You think about how you've been working, what could be better. You think about the results you've created. You look, how have you measured on your key results? You don't have to hit all the key results, all the objectives. At Google talk about hitting 70%. If you hit 100%, you failed because you weren't stretching enough. If you hit less than 70%, that's also kind of a failure because you weren't working well enough. I'm a bit skeptical about that. I think you can get a lot of gameplay around 100%. And if you set a hard and fast rule around the 70% or any other number, you'll get sophisticated gameplay. So I'm more inclined to say when we look at success and failure, let's think about the benefits we've delivered. Let's think about what we've learned. Let's think about our progress towards the shining city on a hill. So we go broad at the end, and then we back to expansive thinking about what the OKRs should be, and we're looping around. And this is happening, probably every quarter. We go round and round again. So that's how OKRs work in practice. Before we finish, I want to add two other ideas. I want to give you two other ideas which aren't strictly speaking from the OKR world. And when I'm working with OKRs, I encourage teams to adopt them. First off is an idea from Amazon, which is day one mentality. I mean, Jeff Bezos likes to say that every day is day one at Amazon. And what he's getting at here is it doesn't really matter what we've done in the past. It doesn't matter what decisions we made in the past. It doesn't matter what sunk costs we've made in the past. Every day, we need to be conscious that we are a startup and we've got to deliver value to our customers. We've got to deliver benefits to our customers. And we want to be constantly aiming at delivering things that make a difference. Now, I don't think that means that we change what we're doing every day on a whim. But it does mean that we're not scared to say something we did before. We got halfway through it. It's half done, and we've now decided it's not worth doing. As a mental exercise, if 3 months ago you decided something was worth doing for customers, and today you realize you've learned something in the last 3 months, means you're building the wrong thing for your customer. There's no good reason to carry on building it. You may have sunk $1 million into it, but if you now realize the customer doesn't want it, it doesn't make sense to throw good money after bad money. On the other hand, if 3 months ago you had a good idea on what the customer wanted, and if everything you have learned in the last 3 months leads you to believe that is still what the customer wants, then it makes perfect sense to carry on in that direction. What we're trying to do is get rid of the ideas that aren't going to deliver us benefit. So this is what Amazon are going out with, the day one mentality. So when it comes to setting OKRs, I really want you to have this day one mentality, to start with a blank sheet of paper. Imagine you're doing this for the first time and say, right, what can we do to move us towards our destination? What can we do to add value, to deliver benefits, to create real meaningful outcomes? The other idea, and I mentioned this earlier on as well, was this idea of strategic staffing. We have our teams, and our teams are stable. That doesn't mean they're static. Of course, some people will leave the team, and new people will come into the team. That's good. We don't want teams to be too staid or we'll get groupthink. But we want teams that are largely stable, and they are organized around our value chain, our products, our long-lasting things in the organization. And we should be allocating our resources, not just our people, but other resources, our funding, our properties, our paper clips. We should be putting them where we see strategic significance. We shouldn't be thinking about the effort involved, because effort leads us astray. we should be thinking strategically, where do we want to be investing? Let's put our resources where our mouth is. So we staff our teams strategically, and then we say to the teams, how can you help us towards our destination? So in summary, OKRs are about desired outcomes. Our objectives are desired outcomes. Our key results are about saying, how high will you try? How are we going to measure success? We align our teams around products and strategy. Our leaders are setting a vision, a purpose, a big, hairy, audacious goal, if you remember them, right? They're painting big pictures and they're leaving white space. Our teams propose OKRs to move towards that vision. And we iterate. Every 3 months, we wipe the slate clean and we repeat. If you'd like to know more, I have a book. It's there on Amazon. Yes, it's about OKRs with Agile. I think even if you're not currently in the Agile world, you'll find useful information in there. I hope you enjoy it. If you'd like to get in contact with me, there's my contact details. There's my website if you want to check me out. Thank you very much.